Welcome to Sleepy Stories Hub. Tonight, we embark on a journey through three enchanting Grimm's fairy tales: the Golden Bird, the Raven, and the Four Clever Brothers. Each story weaves a tapestry of magic, courage, and cleverness, inviting you into worlds of wonder and intrigue. In The Golden Bird, join the quest for a prized bird that brings joy and challenges alike. The Raven whispers a tale of truth and justice, revealing the power of a wise bird's testimony. Meanwhile, the Four Clever Brothers showcase resilience and wit as they aid a princess against a cunning villain. These cherished tales weave lessons of courage, justice, and intelligence, passed down through generations. Join us as we unravel the magic and intrigue within these beloved Grimm's fairy tales. Before we start our enchanting journey through Grimm's fairy tales, take a moment to unwind and prepare for a tranquil experience. Find a comfortable position, gently close your eyes, and take a deep, soothing breath. Feel the tension melt away as you exhale slowly. Allow your mind to settle, releasing the worries of the day. Imagine a serene space where calmness envelops you like a warm embrace. As we immerse ourselves in the tales of the Golden Bird, the Raven, and the Four Clever Brothers, let go of any lingering thoughts. Picture yourself in the midst of these captivating adventures, letting the stories transport you to magical realms. Now, let's begin our journey, embracing the wonder of these timeless tales while we ease into a state of tranquility. Sit back, relax, and prepare to be whisked away into a world of dreams and peaceful slumber. Four Clever Brothers. "Dear children," said a poor man to his 4 sons, "I have nothing to give you. You must go out into the wide world and try your luck. Begin by learning some craft or another and see how you can get on." So the 4 brothers took their walking sticks in their hands and their little bundles on their shoulders, and after bidding their father goodbye, went all out at the gate together. When they had got on some way, they came to 4 crossways, each leading to a different country. Then the eldest said, "Here we must part, but this day 4 years we will come back to this spot, and in the meantime, each must try what he can do for himself." So each brother went his way, and as the eldest was hastening on, a man met him and asked him where he was going and what he wanted. "I am going to try my luck in the world, and should like to begin by learning some art or trade," answered he. "Then," said the man, "go with me, and I will teach you to become the cunningest thief that ever was." "No," said the other, "that is not an honest calling, and what can one look to earn by it in the end but the gallows?" "Oh," said the man, "you need not fear the gallows, for I will only teach you to steal what will be fair game. I meddle with nothing but what no one else can get or care anything about, and where no one can find you out." So the young man agreed to follow his trade, and he soon showed himself so clever that nothing could escape him that he had once set his mind upon. The second brother also met a man, who, when he found out what he was setting out upon, asked him what craft he meant to follow. "I do not know yet," said he. "Then come with me and be a stargazer. It is a noble art, for nothing can be hidden from you when once you understand the stars." The plan pleased him much, and he soon became such a skillful stargazer that when he had served out his time and wanted to leave his master, he gave him a glass and said, "With this you can see all that is passing in the sky and on earth, and nothing can be hidden from you." The third brother met a huntsman who took him with him, and taught him so well all that belonged to hunting that he became very clever in the craft of the woods. And when he left his master, he gave him a bow and said, "Whatever you shoot at with this bow, you will be sure to hit." The youngest brother likewise met a man who asked him what he wished to do. "Would not you like," said he, "to be a tailor?" "Oh no," said the young man, "sitting cross-legged from morning to night, working backwards and forwards with a needle and goose will never suit me." "Oh," answered the man, "that is not my sort of tailoring. Come with me, and you will learn quite another kind of craft from that." Not knowing what better to do, he came into the plan and learnt tailoring from the beginning. And when he left his master, he gave him a needle and said, "You can sew anything with this, be it as soft as an egg or as hard as steel, and the joint will be so fine that no seam will be seen." After the space of 4 years, at the time agreed upon, the 4 brothers met at the 4 crossroads, and having welcomed each other, set off towards their father's home, where they told him all that had happened to them, and how each had learned some craft. Then, one day, as they were sitting before the house under a very high tree, the father said, "I should like to try what each of you can do in this way." So he looked up and said to the second son, "At the top of this tree there is a chaffinch's nest. Tell me how many eggs there are in it." The stargazer took his glass, looked up, and said, "5." "Now," said the father to the eldest son, "take away the eggs, without letting the bird that is sitting upon them and hatching them know anything of what you are doing." So the cunning thief climbed up the tree and brought away to his father the 5 eggs from under the bird, and it never saw or felt what he was doing, but kept sitting on at its ease. Then the father took the eggs and put one on each corner of the table and the 5th in the middle, and said to the huntsman, "Cut all the eggs in 2 pieces at one shot." The huntsman took up his bow, and at one shot struck all the 5 eggs as his father wished. "Now comes your turn," said he to the young tailor. "Sew the eggs and the young birds in them together again, so neatly that the shot shall have done them no harm." Then the tailor took his needle and sewed the eggs as he was told. And when he had done, the thief was sent to take them back to the nest and put them under the bird without its knowing it. Then she went on sitting and hatched them, and in a few days they crawled out and had only a little red streak across their necks where the tailor had sewn them together. "Well done, sons," said the old man. "You have made good use of your time and learnt something worth the knowing, but I am sure I do not know which ought to have the prize. Oh, that a time might soon come for you to turn your skill to some account." Not long after this, there was a great bustle in the country, for the king's daughter had been carried off by a mighty dragon, and the king mourned over his loss day and night, and made it known that whoever brought her back to him should have her for a wife. Then the 4 brothers said to each other, "Here is a chance for us. Let us try what we can do." And they agreed to see whether they could not set the princess free. "I will soon find out where she is, however," said the stargazer as he looked through his glass, and he soon cried out, "I see her afar off, sitting upon a rock in the sea, and I can spy the dragon close by, guarding her." Then he went to the king and asked for a ship for himself and his brothers, and they sailed together over the sea till they came to the right place. There they found the princess sitting, as the stargazer had said, on the rock, and the dragon was lying asleep with his head upon her lap. "I dare not shoot at him," said the huntsman, "for I should kill the beautiful young lady also." "Then I will try my skill," said the thief, and went and stole her away from under the dragon, so quietly and gently that the beast did not know it, but went on snoring. Then away they hastened with her full of joy in their boat towards the ship, But soon came the dragon roaring behind them through the air, for he awoke and missed the princess. But when he got over the boat and wanted to pounce upon them and carry off the princess, the huntsman took up his bow and shot him straight through the heart, so that he fell down dead. They were still not safe, for he was such a great beast that in his fall he overset the boat, and they had to swim in the open sea upon a few planks. So the tailor took his needle, and with a few large stitches put some of the planks together. And he sat down upon these and sailed about and gathered up all pieces of the boat, and then tacked them together so quickly that the boat was soon ready, and they then reached the ship and got home safe. When they had brought home the princess to her father, there was great rejoicing, and he said to the 4 brothers, "One of you shall marry her, but you must settle amongst yourselves which it is to be." Then there arose a quarrel between them, and the stargazer said, "If I had not found the princess out, all your skill would have been of no use. Therefore she ought to be mine." "Your seeing her would have been of no use," said the thief, "if I had not taken her away from the dragon. Therefore she ought to be mine." "No, she is mine," said the huntsman, "for if I had not killed the dragon, he would, after all, have torn you and the princess into pieces." "And if I had not sewn the boat together again," said the tailor, "you would all have been drowned. Therefore she is mine." Then the king put in a word and said, "Each of you is right, and as all cannot have the young lady, the best way is for neither of you to have her. For the truth is, there is somebody she likes a great deal better. But to make up for your loss, I will give each of you, as a reward for his skill, half a kingdom." So the brothers agreed that this plan would be much better than either quarreling or marrying a lady who had no mind to have them. And the king then gave to each half a kingdom, as he had said, and they lived very happily the rest of their days, and took good care of their father, and somebody took better care of the young lady than to let either the dragon or one of the craftsmen have her again. The Golden Bird. In times gone by, there was a king who had at the back of his castle a beautiful pleasure garden in which stood a tree that bore golden apples. As the apples ripened, they were counted, but one morning one was missing. Then the king was angry, and he ordered that watch should be kept about the tree every night. Now the king had 3 sons, and he sent the eldest to spend the whole night in the garden. So he watched till midnight, and then he could keep off sleep no longer, and in the morning another apple was missing. The second son had to watch the following night, but he fared no better, for when 12 o'clock had struck, he went to sleep, and in the morning another apple was missing. Now came the turn of the third son to watch, and he was ready to do so. But the king had less trust in him, and believed he would acquit himself still worse than his brothers. But in the end he consented to let him try. So the young man lay down under the tree to watch, and resolved that sleep should not be master. When it struck 12, something came rushing through the air, and he saw in the moonlight a bird flying towards him, whose feathers glittered like gold. The bird perched upon the tree, and had already pecked off an apple, when the young man let fly an arrow at it. The bird flew away, but the arrow had struck its plumage, and one of its golden feathers fell to the ground. The young man picked it up, and taking it next morning to the king, told him what had happened in the night. The king called his council together, and all declared that such a feather was worth more than the whole kingdom. "Since the feather is so valuable," said the king, "one is not enough for me. I must and will have the whole bird." So the eldest son set off, and relying on his own cleverness, he thought he should soon find the golden bird. When he had gone some distance, he saw a fox sitting at the edge of a wood, and he pointed his gun at him. The fox cried out, "Do not shoot me, and I will give you good counsel. You are on your way to find the golden bird, and this evening you will come to a village in which two taverns stand facing each other. One will be brightly lighted up, and there will be plenty of merriment going on inside. Do not mind about that, but go into the other one, although it will look to you very uninviting." "How can a silly beast give one any rational advice?" thought the king's son, and let fly at the fox, but missed him, and he stretched out his tail and ran quick into the wood. Then the young man went on his way, and towards evening he came to the village, and there stood the two taverns. In one singing and dancing was going on, the other looked quite dull and wretched. "I should be a fool," said he, "to go into that dismal place, while there is anything so good close by." So he went into the merry inn, and there lived in clover, quite forgetting the bird and his father, and all good counsel. As time went on, and the eldest son never came home, the second son set out to seek the golden bird. He met with the fox, just as the eldest did, and received good advice from him without attending to it. And when he came to the two taverns, his brother was standing and calling to him at the window of one of them, out of which came sounds of merriment. So he could not resist, but went in and reveled to his heart's content. And then, as time went on, the youngest son wished to go forth and to try his luck, but his father would not consent. "It would be useless," said he. "He is much less likely to find the bird than his brothers, and if any misfortune were to happen to him, he would not know how to help himself. His wits are none of the best." But at last, as there was no peace to be had, he let him go. By the side of the wood sat the fox, begged him to spare his life, and gave him good counsel. The young man was kind and said, "Be easy, little fox, I will do you no harm." "You shall not repent of it," answered the fox, "and that you may get there all the sooner, get up and sit on my tail." And no sooner had he done so than the fox began to run, and off they went over stock and stone, so that the wind whistled in their hair. When they reached the village, the young man got down and, following the fox's advice, went into the mean-looking tavern without hesitating, and there he passed a quiet night. The next morning, when he went out into the field, the fox, who was sitting there already, said, "I will tell you further what you have to do. Go straight on until you come to a castle, before which a great band of soldiers lie, but do not trouble yourself about them, for they will be all asleep and snoring. Pass through them and forward into the castle, and go through all the rooms, until you come to one where there is a golden bird hanging in a wooden cage. Near at hand will stand empty a golden cage of state, but you must beware of taking the bird out of his ugly cage and putting him into the fine one. If you do so, you will come to harm." After he had finished saying this, the fox stretched out his tail again, and the king's son sat him down upon it. Then away they went over stock and stone, so that the wind whistled through their hair. And when the king's son reached the castle, he found everything as the fox had said, and he at last entered the room where the golden bird was hanging in a wooden cage, while a golden one was standing by. The 3 golden apples, too, were in the room. Then, thinking it foolish to let the beautiful bird stay in that mean and ugly cage, he opened the door of it, took hold of it, and put it in the golden one. In the same moment the bird uttered a piercing cry. The soldiers awaked, rushed in, seized the king's son, and put him in prison. The next morning he was brought before a judge, and as he confessed everything, condemned to death. But the king said he would spare his life on one condition, that he should bring him the golden horse, whose paces were swifter than the wind, and that then he should also receive the golden bird as a reward. So the king's son set off to find the golden horse, but he sighed and was very sad, for how should it be accomplished? And then he saw his old friend the fox sitting by the roadside. "Now, you see," said the fox, "all this has happened because you would not listen to me. But be of good courage, I will bring you through, and will tell you how you are to get the golden horse. You must go straight on until you come to a castle, where the horse stands in his stable. Before the stable door the grooms will be lying, but they will all be asleep and snoring, and you can go and quietly lead out the horse. But one thing you must mind, take care to put upon him the plain saddle of wood and leather, and not the golden one, which will hang close by, otherwise it will go badly with you." Then the fox stretched out his tail, and the king's son seated himself upon it, and away they went over stock and stone until the wind whistled through their hair. And everything happened just as the fox had said, and he came to the stall where the golden horse was. And as he was about to put on him the plain saddle, he thought to himself, "Such a beautiful animal would be disgraced were I not to put on him the good saddle, which becomes him so well." However, no sooner did the horse feel the golden saddle touch him than he began to neigh. And the grooms all awoke, seized the king's son, and threw him into prison. The next morning he was delivered up to justice and condemned to death, but the king promised him his life, and also to bestow upon him the golden horse, if he could convey thither the beautiful princess of the golden castle. With a heavy heart the king's son set out, but by great good luck he soon met with the faithful fox. "I ought now to leave you to your own ill luck," said the fox, "but I am sorry for you, and will once more help you in your need. Your way lies straight up to the golden castle. You will arrive there in the evening, and at night, when all is quiet, the beautiful princess goes to the bath. And as she is entering the bathing house, go up to her and give her a kiss. Then she will follow you, and you can lead her away. But do not suffer her first to go and take leave of her parents, or it will go ill with you." Then the fox stretched out his tail. The king's son seated himself upon it, and away they went over stock and stone, so that the wind whistled through their hair. And when he came to the golden castle, all was as the fox had said. He waited until midnight, when all lay in deep sleep, and then as the beautiful princess went to the bathing house, he went up to her and gave her a kiss, and she willingly promised to go with him. But she begged him earnestly, and with tears, that he would let her first go and take leave of her parents. At first he denied her prayer, but as she wept so much the more and fell at his feet, he gave in at last. And no sooner had the princess reached her father's bedside than he and all who were in the castle waked up, and the young man was seized and thrown into prison. The next morning the king said to him, "Your life is forfeit, but you shall find grace if you can level that mountain that lies before my windows, and over which I am not able to see. And if this is done within 8 days, you shall have my daughter for a reward." So the king's son set to work, and dug and shoveled away without ceasing. But when, on the 7th day, he saw how little he had accomplished, and that all his work was as nothing, he fell into great sadness, and gave up all hope. But on the evening of the 7th day, the fox appeared and said, "You do not deserve that I should help you, but go now and lie down to sleep, and I will do the work for you." The next morning when he awoke and looked out of the window, the mountain had disappeared. The young man hastened full of joy to the king, and told him that his behest was fulfilled, and whether the king liked it or not, he had to keep to his word, and let his daughter go. So they both went away together, and it was not long before the faithful fox came up to them. "Well, you've got the best first," said he, "but you must know the golden horse belongs to the princess of the golden castle." "But how shall I get it?" asked the young man. I am going to tell you, answered the fox. First, go to the king who sent you to the golden castle and take to him the beautiful princess. There will then be very great rejoicing. He will willingly give you the golden horse, and they will lead him out to you. Then mount him without delay and stretch out your hand to each of them to take leave, and last of all to the princess. And when you have her by the hand, swing her up on the horse behind you, and off you go. Nobody will be able to overtake you, for that horse goes swifter than the wind. And so it was all happily done, and the king's son carried off the beautiful princess on the golden horse. The fox did not stay behind, and he said to the young man, Now I will help you to get the golden bird. When you draw near the castle where the bird is, let the lady alight, and I will take her under my care. Then you must ride the golden horse into the castle yard, and there will be great rejoicing to see it. And they will bring out to you the golden bird. As soon as you have the cage in your hand, you must start off back to us, and then you shall carry the lady away. The plan was successfully carried out, and when the young man returned with the treasure, the fox said, Now what will you give me for my reward? What would you like? Asked the young man. When we are passing through the wood, I desire that you should slay me and cut my head and feet off. That were a strange sign of gratitude, said the king's son, and I could not possibly do such a thing. Then said the fox, If you will not do it, I must leave you, but before I go, let me give you some good advice. Beware of two things. Buy no gallows meat and sit at no brookside. With that, the fox ran off into the wood. The young man thought to himself, That is a wonderful animal with most singular ideas. How should anyone buy gallows meat? And I am sure I have no particular fancy for sitting by a brookside. So he rode on with the beautiful princess, and their way led them through the village where his two brothers had stayed. There they heard great outcry and noise, and when he asked what it was all about, they told him that two people were going to be hanged. And when he drew near, he saw that it was his two brothers who had done all sorts of evil tricks and had wasted all their goods. He asked if there were no means of setting them free. Oh yes, if you will buy them off, answered the people. But why should you spend your money in redeeming such worthless men? But he persisted in doing so, and when they were let go, they all went on their journey together. After a while, they came to the wood where the fox had met them first, and there it seemed so cool and sheltered from the sun's burning rays that the two brothers said, Let us rest here for a little by the brook, and eat and drink to refresh ourselves. The young man consented, quite forgetting the fox's warning, and he seated himself by the brookside, suspecting no evil. But the two brothers thrust him backwards into the brook, seized the princess, the horse, and the bird, and went home to their father. Is not this the golden bird that we bring? Said they, and we have also the golden horse and the princess of the golden castle. Then there was great rejoicing in the royal castle, but the horse did not feed, the bird did not chirp, and the princess sat still and wept. The youngest brother, however, had not perished. The brook was by good fortune dry, and he fell on soft moss without receiving any hurt, but he could not get up again. But in his need, the faithful fox was not lacking. He came up running, and reproached him for having forgotten his advice. But I cannot forsake you all the same, said he. I will help you back again into daylight. So he told the young man to grasp his tail and hold on to it fast, and so he drew him up again. Still you are not quite out of all danger, said the fox. Your brothers, not being certain of your death, have surrounded the wood with sentinels, who are to put you to death if you let yourself be seen. A poor beggar man was sitting by the path, and the young man changed clothes with him and went clad in that wise into the king's courtyard. Nobody knew him, but the bird began to chirp, and the horse began to feed, and the beautiful princess ceased weeping. "What does this mean?" said the king, astonished. The princess answered, "I cannot tell, except that I was sad, and now I am joyful. It is to me as if my rightful bridegroom had returned." Then she told him all that happened, although the two brothers had threatened to put her to death if she let out anything. The king then ordered every person who was in the castle to be brought before him, and with the rest came the young man like a beggar in his wretched garments. But the princess knew him and greeted him well, falling on his neck and kissing him. The wicked brothers were seized and put to death, and the youngest brother was married to the princess and succeeded to the inheritance of his father. But what became of the poor fox? Long afterwards, the king's son was going through the wood, and the fox met him and said, "Now you have everything that you can wish for, but my misfortunes never come to an end, and it lies in your power to free me from them." And once more he prayed the king's son earnestly to slay him and cut off his head and feet. So, at last, he consented, and no sooner was it done than the fox was changed into a man, and was no other than the brother of the beautiful princess. And thus he was set free from a spell that had bound him for a long, long time. And now indeed, there lacked nothing to their happiness as long as they lived. The Raven. There was once a queen who had a little daughter, still too young to run alone. One day the child was very troublesome, and the mother could not quiet it, do what she would. She grew impatient, and seeing the ravens flying round the castle, she opened the window and said, "I wish you were a raven and would fly away, then I should have a little peace." Scarcely were the words out of her mouth when the child in her arms was turned into a raven and flew away from her through the open window. The bird took its flight to a dark wood and remained there for a long time, and meanwhile the parents could hear nothing of their child. Long after this, a man was making his way through the wood when he heard a raven calling, and he followed the sound of the voice. As he drew near, the raven said, "I am by birth a king's daughter, but am now under the spell of some enchantment. You can, however, set me free." "What am I to do?" he asked. She replied, "Go farther into the wood until you come to a house wherein lives an old woman. She will offer you food and drink, but you must not take of either. If you do, you will fall into a deep sleep and will not be able to help me. In the garden behind the house is a large tan heap, and on that you must stand and watch for me. I shall drive there in my carriage at 2 o'clock in the afternoon for 3 successive days. The first day it will be drawn by 4 white, the second by 4 chestnut, and the last by 4 black horses. But if you fail to keep awake and I find you sleeping, I shall not be set free." The man promised to do all that she wished, but the raven said, "Alas! I know even now that you will take something from the woman and be unable to save me." The man assured her again that he would on no account touch a thing to eat or drink. When he came to the house and went inside, the old woman met him and said, "Poor man, how tired you are. Come in and rest and let me give you something to eat and drink." "No," answered the man, "I will neither eat nor drink." But she would not leave him alone, and urged him, saying, "If you will not eat anything, at least you might take a draught of wine. 1 drink counts for nothing." And at last he allowed himself to be persuaded, and drank. As it drew towards the appointed hour, he went outside into the garden and mounted the tan heap to await the raven. Suddenly a feeling of fatigue came over him, and unable to resist it, He lay down for a little while, fully determined, however, to keep awake. But in another minute his eyes closed of their own accord, and he fell into such a deep sleep that all the noises in the world would not have awakened him. At 2 o'clock the raven came driving along, drawn by her 4 white horses. But even before she reached the spot, she said to herself, sighing, "I know he has fallen asleep." When she entered the garden, there she found him as she had feared, lying on the tan heap, fast asleep. She got out of her carriage and went to him. She called him and shook him, but it was all in vain. He still continued sleeping. The next day at noon, the old woman came to him again with food and drink, which he at first refused. At last, overcome by her persistent entreaties that he would take something, he lifted the glass and drank again. Towards 2 o'clock, he went into the garden and on to the tan heap to watch for the raven. He had not been there long before he began to feel so tired that his limbs seemed hardly able to support him, and he could not stand upright any longer. So again he lay down and fell fast asleep. As the raven drove along her 4 chestnut horses, she said sorrowfully to herself, "I know he has fallen asleep." She went as before to look for him, but he slept, and it was impossible to awaken him. The following day the old woman said to him, "What is this? You are not eating or drinking anything. Do you want to kill yourself?" He answered, "I may not and will not either eat or drink." But she put down the dish of food and the glass of wine in front of him, and when he smelt the wine, he was unable to resist the temptation, and took a deep draught. When the hour came round again, he went as usual onto the tan heap in the garden to await the king's daughter. But he felt even more overcome with weariness than on the 2 previous days, and throwing himself down, he slept like a log. At 2 o'clock the raven could be seen approaching, and this time her coachman and everything about her, as well as her horses, were black. She was sadder than ever as she drove along, and said mournfully, "I know he has fallen asleep and will not be able to set me free." She found him sleeping heavily, and all her efforts to awaken him were of no avail. Then she placed beside him a loaf and some meat and a flask of wine, of such a kind that however much he took of them, they would never grow less. After that she drew a gold ring on which her name was engraved off her finger and put it upon one of his. Finally, she laid a letter near him in which, after giving him particulars of the food and drink she had left for him, she finished with the following words, "I see that as long as you remain here, you will never be able to set me free. If, however, you still wish to do so, come to the golden castle of Stromberg. This is well within your power to accomplish." She then returned to her carriage and drove to the golden castle of Stromberg. When the man awoke and found that he had been sleeping, he was grieved at heart and said, "She has no doubt been here and driven away again, and it is now too late for me to save her." Then his eyes fell on the things which were lying beside him. He read the letter and knew from it all that had happened. He rose up without delay, eager to start on his way and to reach the castle of Stromberg, but he had no idea in which direction he ought to go. He traveled about a long time in search of it, and came at last to a dark forest, through which he went on walking for 14 days, and still could not find a way out. Once more the night came on, and worn out, he lay down under a bush and fell asleep. Again the next day he pursued his way through the forest, and that evening, thinking to rest again, he lay down as before. But he heard such a howling and wailing that he found it impossible to sleep. He waited till it was darker, and people had begun to light up their houses, and then seeing a little glimmer ahead of him, he went towards it. He found that the light came from a house which looked smaller than it really was, from the contrast of its height with that of an immense giant who stood in front of it. He thought to himself, If the giant sees me going in, my life will not be worth much. However, after a while he summoned up courage and went forward. When the giant saw him, he called out, "It is lucky for that you have come, for I have not had anything to eat for a long time. I can have you now for my supper." "I would rather you let that alone," said the man, "for I do not willingly give myself up to be eaten. If you are wanting food, I have enough to satisfy your hunger." "If that is so," replied the giant, "I will leave you in peace. I only thought of eating you because I had nothing else." So they went indoors together and sat down, and the man brought out the bread, meat, and wine, which although he had eaten and drunk of them, were still unconsumed. The giant was pleased with the good cheer, and ate and drank to his heart's content. When he had finished his supper, the man asked him if he could direct him to the castle of Stromberg. The giant said, "I will look on my map. On it are marked all the towns, villages, and houses." So he fetched his map and looked for the castle, but could not find it. "Never mind," he said. "I have larger maps upstairs in the cupboard. We will look on those." But they searched in vain, for the castle was not marked even on these. The man now thought he should like to continue his journey, but the giant begged him to remain for a day or two longer until the return of his brother, who was away in search of provisions. When the brother came home, they asked him about the castle of Stromberg, and he told them he would look on his own maps as soon as he had eaten and appeased his hunger. Accordingly, when he had finished his supper, they all went up together to his room and looked through his maps, but the castle was not to be found. Then he fetched other older maps, and they went on looking for the castle until at last they found it, but it was many thousand miles away. "How shall I be able to get there?" asked the man. "I have 2 hours to spare," said the giant, "and I will carry you into the neighborhood of the castle. I must then return to look after the child who is in our care." The giant thereupon carried the man to within about 100 leagues of the castle, where he left him, saying, "You will be able to walk the remainder of the way yourself." The man journeyed on day and night till he reached the golden castle of Stromberg. He found it situated, however, on a glass mountain, and looking up from the foot, he saw the enchanted maiden drive round her castle and then go inside. He was overjoyed to see her and longed to get to the top of the mountain, but the sides were so slippery that every time he attempted to climb, he fell back again. When he saw that it was impossible to reach her, he was greatly grieved and said to himself, "I will remain here and wait for her." So he built himself a little hut, and there he sat and watched for a whole year, and every day he saw the king's daughter driving round her castle, but still was unable to get nearer to her. Looking out from his hut one day, he saw 3 robbers fighting, and he called out to them, "God be with you." They stopped when they heard the call, but looking round and seeing nobody, they went on again with their fighting, which now became more furious. "God be with you," he cried again, and again they paused and looked about, but seeing no one went back to their fighting. A third time he called out, "God be with you," and then thinking he should like to know the cause of dispute between the 3 men, he went out and asked them why they were fighting so angrily with one another. One of them said that he had found a stick, and that he had but to strike it against any door through which he wished to pass, and it immediately flew open. Another told him that he had found a cloak which rendered its wearer invisible, and the third had caught a horse which would carry its rider over any obstacle, and even up the glass mountain. They had been unable to decide whether they would keep together and have the things in common, or whether they would separate. On hearing this, the man said, "I will give you something in exchange for those 3 things. Not money, for that I have not got, but something that is of far more value. I must first, however, prove whether all you have told me about your three things is true." The robbers, therefore, made him get on the horse, and handed him the stick and the cloak, and when he had put this round him, he was no longer visible. Then he raised the stick and scared them away with it, crying out, "There, you idle vagabonds, you have got what you deserve. Are you satisfied now?" After this he rode up the glass mountain. When he reached the gate of the castle, he found it closed, but he gave it a blow with his stick, and it flew wide open at once, and he passed through. He mounted the steps and entered the room where the maiden was sitting, with a golden goblet full of wine in front of her. She could not see him, for he still wore his cloak. He took the ring which she had given him off his finger and threw it into the goblet, so that it rang as it touched the bottom. "That is my own ring," she exclaimed, "and if that is so, the man must also be here who is coming to set me free." She sought for him about the castle, but could find him nowhere. Meanwhile, he had gone outside again and mounted his horse and thrown off the cloak. When therefore she came to the castle gate, she saw him and cried aloud for joy. Then he dismounted and took her in his arms, and she kissed him and said, "Now you have indeed set me free, and tomorrow we will celebrate our marriage."